The weight of silence, the hall was silent. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence that comes when hearts are waiting to be moved. Hundreds of people had gathered, expecting a display of strength, of power, of words that could shake the walls. But what they witnessed instead was something no one had planned for. Captain America, the man the world knew as a symbol of courage, stood at the center. His shield was not in his hand. His uniform was not polished for battle. He was not standing as a soldier, but as a man. Beside him sat Keanu Reeves, a figure loved for his calm presence, his humility, his quiet strength that had touched millions. The crowd stared at them, confused, because this meeting was not about war. It was about something deeper. The tension was heavy. Outside the hall, protests rumbled. People were divided, anger rising, voices clashing like storms. They demanded answers. They demanded a show of strength. But inside, Captain America and Keanu carried the weight of another choice. Steve Rogers, once known only as Captain America, felt the eyes of the world pressing on his shoulders. He had been through wars. He had seen cities fall, but nothing felt as difficult as this moment. He was expected to speak words of command, words of power. Yet he looked down at his hands and whispered something that startled even Keanu sitting beside him. "Strength without kindness is only fear," he said softly. Keanu tilted his head, his calm eyes reflecting quiet agreement. "And fear cannot build a future," he replied. The first 5 minutes of silence felt unbearable for the audience. They expected speeches, declarations, promises. Instead, they were met with stillness and words so gentle they felt fragile. But that fragility was power. It was power most people had forgotten. One young boy in the audience, sitting next to his father, leaned forward. He had grown up hearing stories of Captain America's battles, but he had never seen his hero look this human, this vulnerable. For the boy, that moment planted a seed he would never forget. Suddenly, a voice broke from the back. A man shouted, "We don't need kindness, we need action." The words sliced through the hall. Heads turned, some nodding, others frowning. Steve Rogers looked up, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Action without kindness only destroys. I have lived long enough to know that every battle won without compassion is a battle we will fight again tomorrow. We cannot escape the cycle of pain if we do not choose kindness." The hall grew restless. Some clapped, some shook their heads. Keanu Reeves leaned forward, his hands resting gently on the table and his soft voice carried across the room. "I have walked through life with loss," he said. "I have felt pain, loneliness, and despair. But I learned something. Even the smallest act of kindness can lift a broken soul. I have seen people survive not because they were the strongest, but because someone cared enough to help them stand again." There was a shift in the air. The silence changed. It was no longer heavy with expectation, but heavy with thought. People were listening now, not with their ears, but with their hearts. The boy in the front row whispered to his father, "Dad, he's right. Heroes don't just fight, they heal." And that was the moment when part one of this story truly began. Because what seemed like a simple meeting between two men would soon grow into something greater. It would test them, break them, and reveal to the world that kindness is not weakness, but the greatest power a human can hold. The test of true power. The night after the meeting, the city outside the hall was restless. Anger and confusion spread through the streets. Many people had come expecting Captain America to lead with fire in his voice, to promise strength and punishment. Instead, they were given words about kindness, spoken softly, not shouted. And to some, that felt like weakness. Steve Rogers sat alone in his small room, staring at the shield resting against the wall. For years, the shield had been a symbol of protection, of hope. But now, it felt heavier than ever. He asked himself questions he had never dared before. Had he failed the people by choosing gentleness? Had he lost the strength they needed? His heart told him he was right, but the doubts clawed inside like shadows. A quiet knock came at the door. When he opened it, Keanu Reeves was standing there. His presence carried no force, no demand, just calm, as if he had walked through storms all his life and learned how to breathe inside them. "You are troubled," Keanu said softly. Steve nodded. I stood before them and I spoke from the heart. But their eyes, they wanted a soldier, not a man. Keanu stepped into the room and sat down. His hands folded on the table, his gaze steady. The world has been trained to believe that power is loud, that power is about control. But I believe the greatest power is quiet. It is in the hand that helps another stand. It is in the choice to forgive when the world demands revenge. But that power is harder to see, harder to trust. That is why they doubt it. Steve looked at him, his jaw tight. How do we show them? How do we make them understand? Before Keanu could answer, the city's alarms began to wail. Red lights flickered outside the windows. Explosions shook the night sky. They rushed to the balcony, and in the distance, fires rose like angry giants. People screamed in the streets. An unknown group had attacked, striking when the city was divided and vulnerable. Without a word, Steve grabbed his shield. The instinct to fight, to protect, surged through his veins. But Keanu's voice stopped him for a moment. Remember what you said today. Strength without kindness is only fear. Do not forget that. Even in battle. Those words stayed in Steve's chest like a heartbeat as they ran into the chaos. The streets were filled with smoke, debris, and fear. Attackers in dark armor stormed through, not only breaking buildings, but shattering the fragile trust people had in safety. Civilians were trapped, running in every direction. Some froze in terror, some shouted in anger. Steve charged forward, his shield deflecting the first wave of attacks. His movements were precise, strong, a reminder of the hero everyone expected. Yet between the fights, he did something unusual. He stopped to help a woman lift her child from the rubble. He shielded not only himself, but strangers cowering behind cars. He pulled a fallen man to his feet before striking the next enemy. People began to notice. Even in the storm of violence, Captain America was not only fighting, he was caring. And Keanu, without weapons, without armor, moved through the chaos differently. He guided people to safety, carrying the injured, shielding the weak with only his body. He spoke gently to calm children as the ground shook beneath them. When he found a frightened man gripping a broken bottle, ready to lash out in panic, Keanu placed his hand over the man's and whispered, "You are safe. You are not alone." The bottle fell from the man's trembling fingers. The battle raged for hours. Smoke blackened the sky and fear choked the air. Yet a strange thing happened. The crowd that had once doubted began to follow their lead. Ordinary people, inspired by what they saw, began to help one another. Strangers held hands to guide through the smoke. Others lifted rubble to free the trapped. Some shared water with those who had none. Kindness spread in the middle of destruction, like light piercing the dark. When the attackers finally retreated, the city was scarred, but it was not broken. Fires burned. Yes, but so did a new flame in the hearts of the people. Steve stood in the middle of the ruined street, his uniform torn, his shield dented, his chest rising with heavy breaths. Around him, people began to clap, not because he had fought the hardest, but because he had cared the most. Keanu walked to his side, his face calm, but his eyes tired. "You see, Steve," he said quietly, "they did not need a soldier to win their trust. They needed a heart to remind them how to be human." For the first time in years, Steve felt tears rising in his eyes. Not tears of weakness, but of truth. He realized then that the greatest battle was not against enemies outside, but against the hardness inside every heart. As the crowd gathered around, a little girl walked up holding a torn piece of cloth in her small hands. She tied it gently around Steve's wrist like a bandage. Her eyes looked up at him, and she whispered, "Thank you for being kind." That simple moment struck harder than any battle ever had. And deep within Steve, something changed. He understood now that this journey would not be about proving strength, but about proving that kindness could rebuild what hate tried to destroy. The weight of trust. The city still smelled of smoke when dawn came. Broken glass sparkled on the streets like frozen tears. Buildings stood wounded, walls cracked and blackened. Yet the people moved with a strange new energy. They had seen something during the night, something they could not forget. They had seen Captain America fight with kindness. And they had seen Keanu Reeves guide them not with orders, but with compassion. But healing a city is not the same as saving it for one night. The wounds were deeper than rubble, they were inside the hearts of people. Division still lingered like an invisible fire. Whispers rose in the crowd. Some still said kindness was weakness. Some feared the attackers would return stronger. Some wanted revenge, loud and violent. Steve Rogers stood on the steps of the city hall as the sun rose. He looked at the faces gathered before him. Tired faces, angry faces, hopeful faces. He felt their eyes pressing on him, waiting for answers, waiting for a leader who could not only hold a shield, but hold their fears. Keanu was by his side, quiet as always, his hands folded, his gaze steady. He did not need to speak much. His presence alone was like a steady flame, reminding people of calm even when the world shook. Steve took a breath, and his voice carried through the morning air. Last night we faced fire, we faced fear, and we survived. But survival is not enough. If we want peace, we must build it together. And peace cannot be built with anger. It must be built with kindness. His words reached many hearts, but not all. In the crowd, a man stepped forward. His voice was sharp, filled with fury. Kindness will not stop the next attack. They will return, and when they do, your soft words will not protect us. We need force. We need fear on our side, murmurs spread. Some agreed, nodding with clenched jaws. Others lowered their heads, unsure. Steve's chest tightened, but before he could reply, Keanu walked down the steps and approached the man. His movements were slow, unthreatening. He stopped just a few steps away, his voice calm. I understand your anger, Keanu said. I have known loss that burned me inside. I have felt the urge to strike back, to make others suffer as I did. But when I let anger lead, it only hollowed me. It never healed me. And anger never built a safe future for anyone I loved. The man's hands shook. His eyes darted away, but Keanu did not move closer. He only added, True strength is not about who can cause the most fear. True strength is about who can carry the most pain and still choose kindness. Silence spread through the crowd. The man dropped his gaze, unable to answer. But even as hope flickered, shadows grew elsewhere. In a distant corner of the city, a secret meeting was held. The attackers from the night before were not gone. They were regrouping. Their leader, cloaked in darkness, spoke with venom. They think kindness will protect them, the leader hissed. They think weakness is power. We will show them. We will strike again, and this time we will break not only their city, but their spirit. The plan was cruel. It was not about destruction of buildings, but about breaking faith. They wanted to turn the people against their new hope. Back at the hall, Steve and Keanu were called to a council. Leaders from across the nation argued, their voices sharp. Some demanded stronger weapons, others demanded walls and barriers. Fear wrapped around the room like chains. Steve listened, but his mind drifted to the little girl who had tied a cloth around his wrist the night before. He remembered her small voice saying, "Thank you for being kind." That memory became his anchor. He stood, his voice firm but gentle. Walls will not save us. Weapons will not heal us. Fear will not unite us. Only kindness can break the cycle of hate. We must rebuild this city not only with stone, but with trust. The council erupted with doubt. One elder slammed his fist. Trust is fragile, Captain. How can we trust when enemies hide in shadows? Steve looked around, his eyes meeting every doubtful face. Then let us prove it first. Let us be the example. If kindness can survive even in the darkest night, it will inspire others to believe. We will not wait for trust. We will create it. Keanu finally spoke, his words like a quiet river. If we show them that strength is not about fear but about care, they will follow. But we must accept the cost. Kindness always has a cost. Those last words chilled the room. Everyone understood. Choosing kindness meant risking betrayal, risking loss. It was the hardest path. Later that night, as Steve and Keanu walked through the broken streets, they saw people slowly beginning to help one another. Strangers shared food. Neighbors rebuilt homes together. Children comforted each other with small hands. It was fragile, like a flame in the wind, but it was real. Yet in the shadows, the enemy prepared to strike again. And this time, their plan was not to attack with fire, but with deception. They would try to turn the people against Captain America and Keanu to prove that kindness was nothing but a lie. The test was coming, and this time, It would not be fought with fists or shields, but with hearts. Betrayal in the shadows, the days after the attack, felt uneasy. The city worked to rebuild. People painted walls, cleared streets, and shared food. But under the surface, fear moved quietly. Every kind word was followed by a nervous glance, every act of help shadowed by suspicion. It was as if kindness had begun to grow, yet the soil was poisoned by doubt. Steve Rogers felt it when he walked through the streets. Children ran to him with smiles, but adults whispered when they thought he could not hear. Some praised him, others muttered that he had become soft, that he had forgotten what real strength was. Those words did not wound his skin, but they pressed deep into his heart. Keanu noticed it too. He would sit with families in the night, listening to their stories, calming their fears. But when he walked away, he heard the quiet voices behind him. Can we really trust him? He is not one of us. Maybe his calm is just a mask. And in the shadows, that was exactly what the enemy wanted. The attackers had retreated, but not in defeat. Their leader, a man known only as Vaynor, believed in one thing only: fear. He watched from the dark corners of the city, studying how the people looked to Steve and Keanu. His plan was not to destroy them with fire this time, but to break them with doubt. "We will not strike their walls," Vaynor told his followers. "We will strike their trust. If they believe their heroes cannot be trusted, they will crumble from the inside." And so, the whispers began. A stolen cart of medicine was found near a shelter where Keanu had visited. The rumor spread fast. Maybe he took it. Maybe he is not who he says he is. Another night, a false witness claimed to have seen Captain America meeting with one of the attackers, exchanging words in secret. Though there was no proof, fear does not need proof to grow. Soon the council demanded answers. Steve and Keanu were summoned. The room filled with restless voices. An elder pointed a shaking hand. "The people say they cannot trust you. Medicines go missing, food is scarce, and rumors grow stronger each day. If you cannot clear these doubts, then perhaps you are not fit to lead us." The words cut like knives. Steve clenched his fists, not in anger but in pain. Everything he had fought for, everything he had stood for, was being twisted into weakness. Keanu spoke quietly, his calm voice trying to soothe the storm. "Rumors are not truth, but fear spreads faster than kindness. If we allow lies to guide us, then the enemy has already won." But the council pressed harder. "Words are not enough. We need proof. We need action. Prove to us that you are not part of this betrayal." Steve's heart burned with frustration, but he held his voice steady. "If you doubt me, then I will not run from it. I will face whatever trial you give. But know this: my life has been built not on lies, but on service. If I must carry the burden of your doubt, I will carry it." Outside, the crowd was divided. Some cheered his resolve, others shouted that he had already fallen. That night, alone by the ruins of a church, Steve sat with his shield by his side. The sky was dark, the stars hidden by smoke. Keanu found him there, his footsteps soft on the broken stones. "You cannot carry all of their doubt," Keanu said gently. Steve looked up, his voice heavy. "All my life I fought battles I could see. Enemies in front of me, weapons raised. But this is harder. I cannot fight whispers with a shield." Keanu sat beside him, his eyes reflecting the faint glow of fire in the distance. "Then you must fight with something stronger than a shield. You must fight with truth lived each day. People may doubt your words, but they cannot deny your actions. If you remain kind, even when they turn on you, they will see. It may take time and it may cost you everything, but in the end, truth shines brighter than any lie." Steve bowed his head, the weight pressing heavier than the shield ever had. "But what if I lose their trust forever?" Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then at least you will know you did not lose yourself." As they spoke, in the far end of the city, Vaynor prepared his next move. He would strike not with armies, but with betrayal crafted in silence. He had planted seeds of suspicion, but now he wanted to water them with proof, even if the proof was false. A trap was being set, one designed not to kill Captain America or Keanu, but to destroy their bond with the people. The coming days would be the hardest yet, not because of battle, but because of betrayal. And as dawn approached once more, the city would wake to a test that would either break the fragile flame of kindness or prove it stronger than all the darkness in the world. The breaking point, the city woke to a rumor that spread like wildfire. Posters had appeared overnight, nailed to walls and scattered on the streets. Each one carried the same dark message: Captain America has betrayed us. Keanu Reeves hides the truth. At first, people thought it was a cruel joke, but then voices rose in panic. Someone claimed they had seen Steve Rogers walking into the ruins where the attackers once hid. Another swore they had seen Keanu pass gold coins to a stranger in the dark. None of it was proven, yet fear does not ask for proof. Fear only asks for belief, and belief spreads faster than fire. By midday, the city was restless. Crowds gathered, shouting at one another. Some defended Steve and Keanu, others demanded their removal. Stones were thrown at the walls of the council hall, and anger bled into the air like poison. Inside the council chamber, the pressure was unbearable. Leaders argued, their voices rising. One elder slammed his hand against the table. We cannot risk everything on men we cannot trust. If they have betrayed us, the enemy already sits at our table. Steve stood silent, his jaw tight, his heart heavy. His shield leaned against the wall, not as a weapon, but as a burden. Keanu sat quietly beside him, his hands folded, his calm presence standing against the storm of voices. Finally, Steve spoke, his voice low but steady. If you believe these lies, then put me on trial. Judge me not by whispers, but by the truth of my actions. I will not hide. I will not run. The room fell silent for a moment. Then the council agreed. A trial would be held, and the people themselves would watch. The announcement shook the city. Some wept in disbelief, others cheered in anger. And in the shadows, Vayner, the enemy leader, smiled. His plan was working. He had planted lies, and now the people were watering them with their fear. That night, Steve walked through the streets with Keanu at his side. People watched them, their eyes full of doubt. Once, children would run forward for an embrace. Now mothers pulled them away, whispering warnings. Steve felt every glance like a knife. He turned to Keanu, his voice breaking. I fought wars. I carried the weight of worlds, but nothing has ever hurt like this. They do not see me anymore. They see a monster built from lies. Keanu stopped, placing a hand on his shoulder. You are not a monster, Steve. But this is the cost of walking the path of kindness. It is not always praised, it is often punished. Lies are easier to believe than truth. But do not forget, even if the world doubts you, your actions remain real. No one can take that from you. Steve nodded, but the pain stayed. The next morning, the trial began. Thousands gathered in the square, the air thick with tension. The council sat above, and the people filled every space, shouting, demanding, waiting. The accusations were read aloud. Captain America conspired with the attackers. Keanu Reeves used kindness as a mask to hide betrayal. Each word stung, not because it was true, but because so many believed it could be. Steve was asked to speak. He walked to the center, his shield left behind, his eyes fixed on the crowd. I have fought all my life not for power, but for people, he said. I have bled on battlefields so that children could sleep without fear. I have carried the weight of every life lost, every soul I could not save. And now you call me a traitor. If you believe that, then perhaps I have failed you. But I will not fight these lies with anger. I will only remind you of this. Strength without kindness is only fear. And if you choose fear, then everything I stood for will vanish. His words moved some, but others shouted back. Words are easy. Proof is not here. How do we trust you? Before Steve could answer, Keanu stepped forward. His voice was quiet, but it carried across the square. I am no soldier, he said. I cannot raise a shield or lead armies. But I know what it means to suffer. I know what it means to lose. And I know this. When I walked through your streets, I saw your children smile when Steve lifted them from the rubble. I saw your families find hope because he cared. A man who betrays does not risk his life for strangers. A man who betrays does not carry the pain of others on his shoulders. The crowd grew restless again. Some were moved, some hardened. Then suddenly, chaos struck. A man in the crowd, his face hidden beneath a hood, raised a torch and hurled it toward the council stage. Flames roared. Panic erupted. People screamed and scattered. Steve leapt forward, shielding a child from the fire with his own body. Keanu rushed to pull an elder from the falling beams. In the chaos, the hooded man vanished, leaving behind only a trail of doubt. But the people had seen something important. Even when accused, even when hated, Steve and Keanu risked everything to protect them. The trial ended in chaos, but seeds had been planted. For some, trust began to return. For others, suspicion grew deeper. And in the shadows, Vaynor whispered to his followers, they survived this time, but the breaking point is near. Soon their kindness will turn to ashes. The storm was far from over. The next strike would not only test their trust, it would test their very souls. The cost of kindness. The city was no longer calm. Smoke still lingered in the air from the fire at the trial, and fear spread faster than the flames ever had. People argued in the streets, torn between belief and doubt. Some shouted that Captain America had proven himself by saving the child. Others whispered that the fire itself was part of a trick, staged to win sympathy. Steve Rogers walked through the broken square in silence, the ashes crunching beneath his boots. His shield was dented, his uniform stained with smoke, but what weighed on him most was not the damage outside, it was the damage inside. Trust once shattered is hard to rebuild, and he knew Vaynor, the enemy in the shadows, was not finished yet. Keanu Reeves walked beside him, his calm face hiding the weight he also carried. He listened to the whispers, the accusations, the doubts. He felt the sting of mistrust, but he did not let it show. Instead, his voice stayed steady when he spoke. Steve, the truth is not a flame that burns quickly. It is a slow fire. It takes time to be seen. You saved them and still they doubt. But doubt does not erase what is real. Steve shook his head, his voice heavy. But how many more times must we bleed before they see? How many more lies must we endure? Every step forward feels like sinking deeper into mud. Keanu stopped and placed a hand on his shoulder. You chose kindness, Steve. Kindness is not the path of ease, it is the path of cost. It will always take more from you than it gives back at first. But in the end, it gives something no enemy can destroy. Before Steve could answer, the ground shook with another explosion. Screams echoed through the streets. They rushed toward the sound, their hearts racing. When they arrived, the sight froze them. The attackers had struck again, but this time they were not burning buildings. They were targeting the people directly. Innocent families were dragged into the square, bound and trembling. And at the center stood Vaynor himself, his dark cloak billowing, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. You trusted kindness, Vaynor shouted. And where has it brought you? Your city burns, your children cry, and your so-called heroes cannot protect you. Kindness is weakness, and weakness will destroy you all. His soldiers raised their weapons, forcing the crowd to kneel. Fear spread like wildfire. Steve stepped forward, his shield raised, but Vaynor smirked. If you fight, these people die. If you surrender, you prove that kindness is nothing but chains around your neck. The trap was clear. It was not about battle, it was about breaking their spirit. Keanu walked forward, his hands open, his voice calm. Vaynor, you speak of fear as if it is power. But fear is only a shadow. It disappears when light shines. You think kindness is weakness, but kindness has carried these people through more pain than your cruelty ever could? Vaynor laughed, his voice echoing. Then prove it. Save them without blood. Show me this so-called strength. The soldiers pushed one of the children forward, a boy no older than 10, his eyes wide with terror. Steve's chest tightened. Every instinct screamed to fight, to strike, but he remembered Keanu's words. Strength without kindness is only fear. So instead, he dropped his shield. The crowd gasped. Vaynor's smile widened. You surrender? Steve's voice was steady. No, I stand without fear. If you want me, take me. But let them go. Vaynor raised a hand to strike, but something unexpected happened. The boy who had been pushed forward clung to Steve's arm. Don't, the boy whispered. You already saved me once. Don't let him win, the boy's voice carried into the crowd. People began to rise one by one, even under the enemy's weapons. They stood not because they had no fear, but because they saw courage without violence. They saw kindness standing unbroken, Vaynor shouted in anger. Sit down or you will die! But the people did not kneel. Mothers pulled their children close. Fathers linked arms. Elders stood firm. The flame of kindness that Steve and Keanu had carried into their hearts now burned openly. And then, in that moment, Keanu stepped forward, his calm face shining even in the shadow of danger. You cannot kill them all, Vainer. You cannot silence kindness. It will rise in every heart you strike down. You may break bodies, but you will never break what is true. Vayner's soldiers hesitated. Their hands shook. Even they felt the shift. Fear was slipping away, and once fear is gone, power built on fear begins to crumble. With a roar of frustration, Vayner ordered his retreat. Smoke bombs filled the air, and his forces vanished into the shadows. When the smoke cleared, the people were still standing, shaken but unbroken, and for the first time their eyes looked at Steve and Keanu not with doubt, but with faith. A woman in the crowd whispered, "They gave themselves for us. They chose us over themselves." And slowly, voices rose in agreement. But Steve knew this was not the end. Vayner had retreated, but he had not been defeated. And the cost of kindness would grow heavier with each step. As night fell, Steve sat with Keanu on the edge of the ruined square. His voice was tired. "Today we won, but tomorrow he will come again. How much more can we endure?" Keanu looked at him, his voice calm. "As much as it takes. Because true kindness does not stop when it hurts. It grows stronger in pain, and that is why it is the greatest power." The final light, the city did not sleep that night. Though Vayner had retreated, his shadow lingered over every street. Torches burned in watchposts. Guards stayed alert and families huddled close, whispering prayers that the next sunrise would bring peace instead of fire. Yet beneath the fear, something new was alive. The people had stood together without weapons, and for the first time, they felt the strength of unity. Steve Rogers sat in silence on the highest rooftop, his shield beside him, his eyes searching the horizon. The stars were faint, hidden behind smoke, but he stared as if waiting for a sign. His heart was heavy, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of knowing the battle was not finished. Keanu joined him quietly, his steps soft, his presence steady. He sat down beside Steve, saying nothing at first. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words, and in that silence Steve found the courage to confess. "I fear tomorrow," he whispered. "Vayner will not stop. He wants to crush not just this city, but everything we believe in. And I do not know if I am strong enough anymore." Keanu looked at him, his calm eyes reflecting the faint glow of the city below. "Strength is not about never fearing, Steve. Strength is standing when fear tells you to fall. You have done that again and again, and you will do it again tomorrow. But this time you will not do it alone." As dawn broke, the final strike came. Vayner returned with his full force, armies pouring into the city like a black wave. The ground shook with their march, the air filled with their war cries. But this time the city did not scatter. This time the people stood ready. Steve raised his shield, but he did not stand at the front as a lone soldier. He stood in the middle of the people, shield lifted not just for himself, but for everyone around him. Keanu moved through the crowd, speaking calm into trembling hearts, reminding them of the strength they had already shown. The battle was brutal. Steel clashed, fire roared, the sky darkened with smoke. Steve fought with all his strength, but between each strike, he never forgot the words he had spoken. Strength without kindness is only fear. He defended not just with blows, but with care, pulling the wounded to safety, shielding the weak, lifting the fallen. And Keanu, unarmed, walked into the chaos with nothing but his voice and his hands. He carried the injured, comforted the frightened, and guided people through the flames. To the soldiers who wavered, he spoke words that cut deeper than any blade. "You do not have to follow fear. You can choose something greater." Some dropped their weapons, their hearts moved by his unshakable calm. Vayner watched from the center of his army, fury burning in his eyes. No matter how much fear he spread, it was not enough. Kindness was breaking through, stronger than his cruelty. In rage, he charged toward Steve. The two clashed in the heart of the city, shield against blade, light against shadow. Their fight shook the ground, but as the battle raged, Vaynor shouted, "You are a fool, Rogers! Kindness will not save you. It will only break you." Steve pushed back, his voice steady even as his body trembled. "Maybe it will break me, but if kindness lives on in them—" He looked at the people standing unbroken. "Then I will gladly be broken." Vaynor struck hard, knocking Steve to his knees. The crowd gasped. But before the final blow could fall, Keanu stepped forward, placing himself between Steve and the blade. His calm eyes met Vaynor's rage. "You think power is taking life?" Keanu said softly. "But the greatest power is giving it. You will never understand that, and that is why you will never win." Vaynor's blade shook in his hand. For the first time, doubt flickered in his eyes. The crowd began to chant, their voices rising like thunder. "Kindness, kindness, kindness." With their voices rising, Steve stood again. With one final strike, he disarmed Vaynor, sending his blade clattering to the ground. The enemy soldiers, seeing their leader fall, dropped their weapons. The battle was over. The city stood in silence for a moment, then erupted in cheers. Not cheers of victory in war, but cheers of victory in spirit. They had chosen kindness over fear, and they had won. Steve dropped his shield, looking around at the people. His voice was quiet, but carried across the square. "This is your victory, not mine. Not his, yours. You proved that kindness is not weakness. It is the greatest power we have." Keanu stood beside him, his calm smile reflecting the truth of that moment. Children ran forward, embracing them both. Families wept in relief. Strangers held each other as if they were family. The city was scarred, but it was alive, stronger than before. As the sun rose higher, the light broke through the smoke, shining on the broken streets like a promise. Steve looked at Keanu and whispered, "You were right. Kindness costs everything, but it gives more than we can ever measure." Keanu nodded. "And as long as we choose it, the world will never be lost." And so the story of that day was carried beyond the city, told and retold until it became more than history. It became a lesson that true strength is not in the shield, not in the sword, but in the heart that chooses kindness when the world demands fear.